Good morning, students. I want to go ahead and go over a solution to the React App challenge that I'm sharing out this morning. So this one's kind of fun because I think it's got Alex built this to have 10 errors in it. So I've already got my app up and running. I see failed to compile, can't resolve /main in React App challenge source. Okay, so I've got an error right out of the gate. Note on this, hopefully I've already shared, none of the errors should come from package.json, so they should be just isolated to our app.js and our components, I believe. Main, hero button, maybe villain button. So I think all the errors are in these four things. All right, so can't resolve. Let's see. So let's see. That's a hint to me that maybe it's being imported incorrectly. I'm going to go to app. Oh, yeah, and there we go. Okay, so we're trying to import main from /main, which that's not going to work because we are pathing from the location of app.js. So / takes us to source. That's the folder that holds app, but we certainly don't have available main to us. So we got to dig into components to get that. So let me just go ahead and delete this. So I've got access to the autocomplete components main. There we go. Okay. On to a different error. So 1 of 10 down-ish, 1 of 10-ish. Invalid left-hand side and assignment expression, line 23 in main.js. Okay, let's take a look there. So thankfully, React leaves these breadcrumbs for us that are pretty good, right? Compared to say the vanilla JS stuff that you've done in gold and even Angular in red, React has some of the friendliest error messages. Sometimes you will see a failed to compile or a render issue and it just points to index.js, which is not helpful because we don't edit that file. So you'll have to do some digging on your own, but frequently you're going to get something as nice as this, like, hey, this is the line the error message is occurring from. So on 23, I see await this.state equals villain. So it looks like we're trying to set state here. Looks like we're trying to set state here by just setting an equal sign. We know that the React way to do that is to use set state. So let's go ahead and try to refactor this a little bit. This.set state. In our object, we'll have mode. I'm just seeing a pattern here. I assume we're trying to set the mode. Let's set the mode to be villain. Okay, that error is gone. Now notice that doesn't necessarily mean that I did what the program designer was intending. Part of the difficulty in refactoring this is we're not really sure what's supposed to be happening here, right? So I'm just trying to fix the syntax errors and I'm hoping that that's going to carry over into the context the original coder was designing this app in. Adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. Did you want a JSX fragment? So line 45. Okay, let's take a look. Line 45. Oh, okay, cool. So here, a couple of things. I went ahead and solved this last night because I'd not done this before and I didn't know how long it would take. So data, if we look inside of that, this is kind of cool. You can set up a file if you know you're going to have a lot of just like hard-coded values. This is a really good design pattern. Set up a file to hold, in this case, an array of objects. Each object represents a hero with the same properties: hero, name, real name, universe, and power. Superman, everything. I don't think I'd seen that before. That's good. Okay, so we've got this array of heroes. We import that in main, go into data, heroes and villains. We're calling that imported array data, right? And then we're also trying to use, let's see, where is that? So I know that what this site should be doing is when you initially load in, it's going to show all the heroes and villains. Toggle hero and toggle villain are going to set your mode to be hero or villain. So you're going to selectively display one of the two groups. Then map data has the goal of, it does a filter on the data. It's filtering the heroes, or it's filtering the villains. Oh, I should be pointing to this. If the state mode is hero, it's going to filter the characters by their hero status. If the state mode is set to villain, it's going to filter the heroes by their hero status not being hero, so they're villains, right? And we store that in map data. So we store what's called a subset, or a smaller group of the data, in map data. Then, so map data is going to have all the heroes or all the villains. That gets mapped to render data, which then gets called down here. So render data is supposed to handle the, like, hey, here are our heroes. Let's turn our heroes into JSX. Let's turn this into displayable HTML. Okay, so the problem we're seeing, if we hover over the red, JSX expressions must have one parent element. We've seen that a lot. Let's do that the sleek way. React.fragment, and got this code, pull it up here, tab it so it looks nice, and looks like another error is down. Okay, failed to compile. Attempted import error. UI villain button does not contain a default export. It's imported as villain button. Okay, well, how did that get in? It didn't get exported at all. So let's do an export default villain button. Okay, now does main, sweet. Now this should work, I think. So main is trying to grab villain button. Inside the UI, we'll find villain button. That looks right to me. And now we have an export. If we didn't export the default, if we just exported, oh, wait a second, export, let's do this. I don't remember the syntax offhand. Export const villain button. If we just export the villain button like that, you can still grab it. It's still complaining, does not contain a default export. You can still grab the villain button in a separate file, but now you have to name it explicitly. You have to say, hey, I want the thing that's called villain button in the file I'm pulling it from. So yeah, just a little nuance there on imports and exports. All right, so what's up next? Main.js component is not defined, line 5. Let's get some space in here. Class main extends component. Oh, we didn't import component from React. So let's do a react.component here. All right, now line 33, data is not defined. Well past line 33. Oh, okay, so we just got a typo there. That should have been lowercase data. Character is not defined, 38, 42, 43, 44, 45. Okay, what's going on with that? Character into, oh, okay. So this is a problem with us trying to use a callback function. Well, an arrow callback function. If you've got multiple parameters you're using for your function, here we're trying to map through map data, and we're going to look at the character and its index. You need to, just like you would do with the traditional function, you need to wrap these in parentheses. You can get away with no parentheses around your parameters if there's a single parameter. But when you've got two, you need to wrap it. Just like when, let me highlight this as well. Just like when your arrow function, spreads across multiple lines, you need, well, thinking. You usually need the not angle brackets, the curly braces as well, right? So when you've got two parameters, they need to be wrapped in parentheses. When you've got multiple lines, you need to wrap those in curly braces. Okay, all right, line 6, props is not defined, and that is in hero button. Okay, well, we didn't grab our props when this component gets called. On clicks, we're trying to use props toggle hero. We need to make sure that we define that as a parameter. Okay, now I'm getting the style prop expects a mapping from style properties to values, not a string. For example, style equals margin right spacing plus em when using JSX. And H1 at app line 9. Okay, let's take a look at that. Oh, we've got style is left indent, and left indent is just hanging out down here below our class. So let me save that guy, and I'm going to bring it up top. Okay, app.js line 14 now. Okay, can I do... No, that's not going to work. Oh, duh. Okay. So it's hanging out up top, but we can't refer to the left indent object as a string. We've got to use curly braces to grab that object. So left indent, let's see, instance.render is not a function. So this is a less helpful error message for sure. We're being pointed to React DOM development JS. That's internal to React. So we got some sort of render problem floating around. So let's see if we can find that. I'm going to start with heroes and villains. Nothing to render there. Hero button looks pretty good. It's got a single div, so it's got a wrapping element. We're just pumping out a button here. Class name, even though that doesn't get used for styling, not a problem. OnClick comes from a prop. We would get a specific complaint about that. Villain button, similar to that. It gets exported even though the export looks a little different. Similar setup. So I think the problem's coming from main. Okay. So I see, well, I've got another left indent that's just hanging out below. I may as well grab that and put it above my class. The class can reference that whenever it wants. Oh, compiled successfully. Instance.render is still not a function. Okay. Well, so I'm convinced, well, I'm not thoroughly convinced, but I'm mostly convinced that hero button and villain button are doing just fine. So I don't think that's a problem. Divs shouldn't cause a break. These divs, those divs, these divs, divs are certainly not going to break instance.render. So what's going on with this.state.render data? Well, remember that when you fire off the class component, the constructor initiates all the internal data inside your class. We set the state here, and then we go down to, oh, we're calling that component did mount. Well, that's a problem. This should be render. Okay, let's see if that works now. Heroes and villains. Oh, okay. Well, that's kind of interesting. That's kind of interesting. Okay, so this is kind of a fascinating way to do this. I don't think I would have thought to design it this way. So we initiate our class to have just a state property of mode. And then, so after the constructor fires, we go down to now what is this render. And we want to show this.state.render data, which isn't there. So React is smart enough to just not display anything, right? If that feels a little weird to you, it certainly does to me. I like to have, if my render is calling something, I like to have some control over all the stuff that gets fired off on that first render, rather than just trusting React to show nothing. I may say, hey, I know that I set state down in line 60, so render data is the filtered heroes or villains turned into JSX. Well, what if we just say, render data is going to be an array eventually. What if we set it to just be an empty array right out of the gate? Okay, and then that can be changed later with the set state. And so we see nothing. Or you could also say, initially, make render data just the data from heroes and villains from this file, right? And oh, that'll break because it's saying, hey, found an object with keys. I can't display that. Well, never mind on that. But at least when we initially have this set up, we can see that, oh, we should have an array that will be used eventually. Okay, nothing initially, heroes and villains are toggled. Got this cool little purple thing going on. I like it. This is a good little challenge. Alex did a nice job on this. Okay, all right, there's your video. Not too terribly long. Hope you guys enjoyed it, had fun with this challenge. This is kind of a cool one. And yeah, I'll see you in class.